Why is there no one here? Are you having class today? The parking lot's kind of empty too.
Yeah, I know. It's like, was it canceled? Nobody told me. So I can only have two.
I felt that when I was walking in, and I was like, wow, there's no one in the parking lot.
Oh, now we have 3, 4. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Nice start, man.
Yeah, thank you. My wife picked it out for me. Those things are little death traps. Oh, I almost took a header on one of those.
This was not sticky. I was gonna say, how many did we get them to not stick up?
You have to lift it up and then push it down, push the end of it down.
Okay, cool. That's why I haven't tripped over it before.
Yeah, that almost took me all the way to the wall trying to not fall on my face.
Yeah, I was focused on.
Not funny,
She came in here, I wasn't paying.
No, it's funny now. Yeah, but you know, at the time it was like, whoa.
Yeah. I really like it, but, I've never really- I don't know.
You could open the test that happened this weekend.
The bone test?
Yes.
I could, if you wanted me to.
It's still saying that it's due tomorrow.
Oh, don't worry about that.
If you were to open it, someone wants to take.
If I could open it and just leave it open
Yeah.
till for several weeks, and that way there'd be no pressure. Yeah, I can do that.
That sounds good.
Okay. I'm trying to avoid anybody getting overly stressed.
Well, if we get that before, but some people miss.
Yeah, and-
In all the classes.
And that's fine. I'll be glad, I'll be more than happy to do that. So.
What's going on? I will just stop. So that's what it takes here.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm sure people will continue to trickle in for whatever reason. So one of those days, I guess. Okay, we are a couple housekeeping things. We are going to probably wrap up, well, by the end of next week, we should wrap up chapter 24. I think we'll go through it. It's only 70 slides or thereabouts. We should go through about half of it today, half of it next Wednesday, and be done with that. So that means we'll be done with unit 2, which is cells and metabolism. So at some point, I'll open up a test for us on that for lecture. What I want to do for lab for the bone test is ignore that deadline for tomorrow. That's just, I had to have a placeholder in there. So what I want to do is for those of you that are prepared to take the bone test and want to take it online, go right. I want to open it up and I want to leave it open for several weeks. So there's no pressure, no rush. It's not going to be due tomorrow. It's not going to be due next Wednesday. I'll leave it open until the week after fall break, which is when I was going to offer it on ground anyway. Now you have the option. You can always take it online. You can always, or you can take it on ground. I will say that on ground is probably going to be a little easier because you can pick up the stuff and look at it and manipulate it. So it's up to you. Whatever you're most comfortable with, I'm fine. Whatever you want to do is going to be fine. I will probably, since we'll finish unit 2 in lecture next week after we come back. Well, that's exciting, come back and finish. So I'll probably have a test set up so that we can take the test online when I'm not taking it. So that I could, but I sort of know the answers, so it wouldn't be fair. I'd probably only get a 50. So I'll have it set up so after you're done with the bone test, you'll have plenty of time to get ready for the, for lecture. I don't want to have any overlap between bone test and lecture test. I absolutely hate having to give 2 tests in the same week. I don't want to do that. And hopefully we can get through the whole semester without that happening. So far, so good. I don't think it's fair to make you, study bones and turn around and study, structures and cells or something like that. So anyway, that's sort of the plan, and see how it goes. Now, today we're going to start looking at metabolism. First half of metabolism deals with nutrition. That's the nice half of it. The other half is the ugly half on cellular respiration. You don't know why it's the ugly half yet. You won't find out until next week. But cellular metabolism becomes a dirty word for us, at least initially. We'll see later on how you feel about that. Okay. Any questions? Trust me, lots of people say cellular metabolism is a dirty word. Lots of people groan when they say cellular metabolism. Okay, let's go ahead and get into what we call chapter 24. We call it chapter 24 because in the old textbooks we used, it was the 24th chapter, and we did it out of sequence because we felt that it was important to, if you're going to study cells, you got to study how the cells get their energy. And that was the 24th chapter of the book. And we just still call it chapter 24. Yeah. Are we stuck in a rut? Yeah, probably. So, okay. Nutrients and nutrition. A lot of things about nutrition that, as a healthcare provider, you will have to help to keep your patients educated. Lots of people have lots of ideas about what is food and what isn't food, and what's appropriate and about calories and weight gain and weight loss and things like that. But nutrients are, there are only 6 basic nutrients. These are the things we need for, as they say, growth, maintenance, and repair. We have carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. Obviously, we've talked about those already in the organic molecules. Vitamins and minerals are the 4th and 5th nutrients, and water is the 6th one. There's an awful lot of water in all the food that we eat, whether it's in plants and salads and stuff like that, or things we drink, or the moisture content in any food that we presume to be a solid food is still has a pretty fair amount of water inside of it. These are the 6 categories of nutrients. And no matter what anybody says, I think coffee is the 7th, but that's a whole nother issue. So, okay. So this is a chart put together by our Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. at great expense. That's sarcasm, by the way, not the great expense part. But this chart is supposed to show us what we're supposed to eat. The healthy foods are on the bottom of the pyramid, and the foods that they consider unhealthy are at the top. At the bottom of the pyramid, the whole grains, the whole wheat type foods, the oils, the plant oils, olive oil, corn oil, any vegetable oil. And then above that, we have fruits, vegetables and fruits. Well, obviously, we've gone from boring to more boring. But the thing about fruits, and we'll talk about that, is fruits are a 2-edged sword on here. They provide nutrients for us that we need and lots of vitamins, but they have lots of sugar in them too. Lots of sugar. That's why we like to eat certain fruits, because they're sweet. The nuts are high in protein, and they have oils. The oils are unsaturated oils, but again, they also are high in carbohydrates. There's lots of calories in there, so it's a trade-off. The beans, the legumes, the beans and peas, again, they're full of carbohydrates. They are healthy. They have a lot of cellulose fiber around the outside covering, which is good for us. Fiber in our diet is good. Fish, chicken, eggs. I'm surprised they put eggs that low, because eggs have cholesterol. I'm surprised they didn't put eggs at the very top. Chicken is and fish are very good for us. Dairy products. Dairy is almost into the evil range here, because dairy, yes, it has calcium and it has vitamin D in it, but it also has fat in it too. So we talk about how much dairy do we drink or consume on a daily basis. And at the very top are the evil foods, the white rice, the white bread, the potatoes, all the pastas, all the sweet things we like to eat. All those are, because eat those sparingly along with red meat and butter. Well, it all comes down to moderation. How much do you eat of any one particular thing? How much do your patients eat of any one thing? There is no such thing as food that is evil, in the sense that you look at it from a healthcare perspective. It's all about moderation. Biscuits and gravy for breakfast every day is probably not a good idea, because of all the extra calories and fat and carbohydrates and fat you're picking up in there. But biscuits and gravy once a week is not a bad deal. Bacon and eggs for breakfast once a week is not going to be harmful. People like to eat different things every day. One of the reasons behind all this is, for years and years, the standard breakfast fare in the United States was, anybody guess? I just mentioned it.
Bacon and eggs.
Bacon and eggs. Everybody, and if you go to Cracker Barrel, how many bacon and egg combinations does Cracker Barrel have on their breakfast menu? A lot. And I like Cracker Barrel, but And they'll serve up biscuits with it too, and gravy if you want it. You know, they'll give you that heart-stopping good breakfast. All the fixings, yeah. But, and you know, there's nothing wrong with that once in a while. And there's nothing wrong with bacon and eggs maybe once a week. But the traditional breakfast for a long time was always bacon and eggs. And then a meat and potatoes dinner in the evening. And that was the standard diet for most Americans. And so we watched heart disease cases climb throughout the 40s and 50s and 60s and into the 70s. You know, a lot of it driven by diet. So anyway, okay, nutrition. The things that we eat become fuel for our body. We're going to take the nutrients that we consume and we're going to convert them to ATP, adenosine triphosphate. ATP is the molecule we use to deliver energy to the cells. The energy comes from the carbohydrates. Now the carbohydrates, if we eat a starchy food, we're going to break that down to glucose. And then we're going to take the energy from the glucose. See, we can't take energy from starch because it's too big a molecule, but glucose is a little molecule. It's only 6 carbons as opposed to 10,000 carbons. We'll break down the glucose and we'll release the energy from it and use that to make ATP. And we can do the same thing with proteins and the same thing with fats if we need to. So even though we need proteins and fats for other things, if we don't have enough carbohydrates, we can convert the fats to glucose. We can convert the protein to glucose. It's a process known as gluconeogenesis, the creation, that's where Genesis comes in, the creation of new glucose, gluconeogenesis. And it happens. It happens all the time in our bodies. A pregnant woman will often experience gluconeogenesis because she will be sending her normal glucose from her diet to the placenta to be transferred to the baby. She'll have to be breaking down fats and proteins to get her glucose. And the end result of that, if it becomes excessive, it leads into what we call gestational diabetes. So, because she has too much glucose in her body. You'll hear all about that in endocrine and in pregnancy and repro in AP2, just a little teaser for AP2. So now we measure the available energy in food that we eat in calories. You know, the actual value of a nutrient, the actual calorie content we see in something we eat or drink is actually a kilocalorie. It doesn't really matter. We read it as calories. Like this breakfast bar here says 120 calories. Well, that's 120 kilocalories. We don't care. You know, we see it as 120 calories of energy. That is the potential energy in this little pumpkin spice bar. So, because it's, you know, it's October, so it's pumpkin spice. So, and so it's 120 calories of energy available, potential energy available. And that's theoretically how much we could get out of that. Now we'll see later in the chapter that we really only get about 40% of that energy for us to do things with. The other 60% goes off as heat. But that's not a bad deal. You know, 40% of this is energy for us to use. The other 60% gives us a constant body temperature. So, but we measure the calorie content, you know, in by how much energy is available. Now there's a chemist would tell you that a calorie is the amount of energy necessary to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water. That's about 2 pounds of water by 1 degree Celsius. And there are very sophisticated devices called calorimeters that food is, you know, like a food substance is oxidized to ash in there, and the amount of energy that's released is measured, and then it's compared to, you know, how much energy it takes to increase the temperature of water by just 1 degree. So anyway, we don't need to worry about that. You know, I've never heard anybody talk about Well, you know, I bet that celery stalk will raise it a half a kilogram, half a degree, you know.
I might do that just to mess with my friends now.
Well, that would be fine. That would be fine, you know. It's like when I was in college and we'd come from the anatomy labs and we'd always sitting around the table. If we had chicken or something that night, we'd be dissecting the chicken. And it was funny because all the other tables around us would just sort of go away. They'd leave us, you know. Not that we weren't louder than we should have been, but you know. Okay, now the carbohydrates. The carbohydrates, most of our carbs come from plants. We have, and we talked about this already, we have the simple sugars, the mono and disaccharides. We have glucose and sucrose. We have lactose, which is milk sugar. We have fructose, which is a monosaccharide. Fructose, we get a lot of fructose if we drink Cokes or Pepsis. Because the sweetener in a Coke, or what do you have there?
Sprite.
Sprite, okay, is it normal Sprite?
Yeah, it's normal. Sprite.
Okay, so it's probably got high fructose corn syrup in there as its sweetener. It's been 20 years since the soft drink industry switched from sugar, pure sugar, to high fructose corn syrup. It's cheaper. We probably don't remember. You know, I don't think there's enough people left that remember or drank enough Coke to remember what it tasted like with real sugar in it. You know,
They still sell them sometimes.
you
Like
Coke doesn't cooperate with that, but Pepsi does. Pepsi and Mountain Dew. And I know there's a candy shop up in Gatlinburg that usually has some of the retro Mountain Dew and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper with real cane sugar in there instead of the fructose corn syrup. So if you drink a Coke or a Pepsi or something like that right now, you're going to get a good dose of high fructose corn syrup in there. Lots of foods have corn syrup. Some types of ketchup have corn syrup as the sweetener in there, because you know you can buy it on the label. It says contains no high fructose corn syrup, or the other bottles doesn't say that. If it doesn't say that, it probably has it in there. You know, why do you have to sweeten ketchup? Who knows? Anyway, the simple sugars are going to come from fruit. They're going to come from sugar cane and sugar beets. Half of our granulated sugar, the stuff you buy in the yellow bags or the blue bags, like at Walmart, half of them come from sugar cane. The other half come from sugar beets. The only way that you know is on the label where it says, if it says pure cane sugar, it's from sugar cane. If it says pure sugar, it comes from sugar beets. You can't tell the difference. You know, side by side, they taste exactly the same. And there's no cost differential either. Probably a little collusion in the industry, but there is no cost differential. I mean, a 5-pound bag of sugar, regardless if it's cane sugar or beet sugar, costs the same and it tastes the same. So what's the difference on that? Honey is a great source of monosaccharides, and milk. Milk has a disaccharide. It has lactose, you know, the milk sugar in there. So we see carbohydrates coming from that. The ideal sugars in our diet are the complex sugars, the polysaccharides like starch. The starches we get in the cereal grains, like anything made from wheat or corn or rice, like, you know, whole wheat cereal, you know, Raisin Bran, for example, bless you, or corn flakes, even Frosted Flakes, Rice Krispies made from rice, and any variation on, you know, corn and rice and wheat, or oats, Cheerios, can't forget Cheerios, granola, there you go, a combination of several of those. You know, like this is made with, this is granola in here, so it has, what does it have in there? Oh, well, there we go. Rolled oats, first ingredient. Whole grain rolled oats, sugar, corn syrup. There you go. Palm kernel and soybean oils, coconut, coconut and pumpkin. So, but so that's oats. So there's 4 basic grains make up our cereals, and the grains themselves are pretty healthy. Cheerios is an oat cereal, and so are all the knockoffs. The Oreos or whatever that look like Cheerios, don't taste like Cheerios, but look like Cheerios. Never get into an argument with a 5-year-old over the taste of Cheerios. They'll always win. 5-year-olds have an incredible sense of taste, and if you try to pass off knockoff Cheerios to a 5-year-old, they won't eat it. Been there, done that years ago. Okay, the commercials that Cheerios says they're heart healthy, and they have a little heart on their box. It's all true. The husk of the oat kernel, let's see where bran comes from, like an oat and wheat have an outer covering made out of cellulose. We call it the husk or the bran. And so if we eat food that's high in like we say whole wheat or whole oat, then we're getting that outer covering too. And in the case of oats, that fiber improves our HDL cholesterol levels, the good cholesterol, the high density lipoproteins. The oat bran enhances that. So it truly is a heart healthy cereal, but then so is oatmeal, and so is any other cereal made from oats. So it's not just Cheerios, but what they're saying is a valid statement. It is a heart healthy type of meal because it improves our HDL levels and lowers our overall cholesterol in our bodies. But any other, you can have a bowl of oatmeal every day and do the same thing. I think Cheerios is a little less boring than oatmeal, but so whereas the wheat brands, that fiber tends to have more of a cleansing effect on our large intestine, which is also a good thing. It's a part of it's still fiber. It acts in a different location. So these are all coming from polysaccharide carbohydrates. These starches, whether they're from corn or wheat or oat or even rice, are good for us. So are the legumes. All the starches in the beans and the peas are great, and the root vegetables, the carrots and the potatoes. Yes, potatoes, are also considered very good for us because they are complex carbohydrates. The beauty of a complex carbohydrate is that it takes a long time to break it down to sugars. We eat it. If we eat a potato or a big plate of pasta, we have starchy foods. It takes our bodies a while to break that down to glucose. We don't get the release of all the energy from the pasta or the potato at once. Like you're getting, like the Snickers bar commercial. When you're not yourself and you're Betty White, and then you stop being Betty White. She stopped too, but that's a whole other story. No one's going to give you a potato. Here, you don't look like you're feeling very perky. Have a baked potato, and you're going to eat the baked. And who doesn't like baked potatoes? So you eat this baked potato, and in 5 minutes you're up and around, and you're doing all sorts of things. It doesn't work that way. The baked potato, because of the starches, takes time to get that energy into. It's a slow release, which is what our bodies like. The reason that that Snickers bar commercial works so fast is because you're dealing with sugars, and you get that sugar rush, which is fast but has no long-lasting effects. The potato or the starches, because they're polysaccharides and take time to break down, will give you a nice sustained level of energy. The cellulose around any kind of starchy food, the outer covering, like the skin of the potato, the kernel on corn, or around wheat or oats, or what we call the bran. It's made of cellulose. It's made of, that's what makes up the cell walls of plants. Plants can't protect themselves against water loss real well. And they're always, a plant is always losing water through its leaves. So it has cellulose around its cells, so it can restrict the water flow. But we don't need to worry about that. We just can't process that cellulose. It becomes the fiber. Wheat bran, if you like Raisin Bran cereal, Raisin Bran is full of cellulose. It has the whole bran included in there. If you buy whole wheat bread and you like whole wheat bread, then you're going to pick up all the bran in there. And it does have what we call a fairly, good cleansing effect on the colon. It keeps the colon processing fecal matter to remove it from the body without, your patient doesn't want to become constipated. Your patient doesn't want to have diarrhea. Two conditions that occur simply based on a little bit of the water levels in the fecal matter. Too much water leads to diarrhea. Too little water leads to constipation. The longer the feces stay in the colon, the more likely it is to accumulate and cause constipation, or maybe even processing additional things out of the waste that we didn't want to retain. So we like the cellulose helps to keep us regular. If you work with older patients, one of the things that older patients love to talk about is have they had a bowel movement today? You're nodding your head. Yes, that's a high topic of conversation among older people. That and colonoscopies, but that's don't get a whole bunch of old people standing around at church talking about their colonoscopies, and you'll just hear these horror stories. The tube was this big, Anyway, okay. I digressed. So, what we want is to get down to glucose. We like glucose. Glucose is what we can break down to release the energy. It's easy for us to break the covalent bonds in a glucose molecule and release all the energy available. We can get a lot of energy out of one molecule of glucose. And we use glucose, this is what we use to make ATP. Remember, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It has 3 phosphates attached to it, to the adenosine base. The third phosphate is a high energy phosphate. And we can use the energy from glucose to take adenosine diphosphate with its 2 phosphates and jam the third one on there. And it's got 7 kilocalories of energy parked in there, in that chemical bond in the ATP. There's 7 kilocalories of energy that we can then send somewhere in our bodies to do something like contract a muscle or generate a nerve impulse or trigger a heartbeat or anything like that. Now, they only last about 6 seconds, but every time we make one, it's good for about 6 seconds with 7 kilocalories of energy, and we're making a lot. Each ATP, each glucose molecule can make about 36 ATP. So that's a lot of energy that it's transferring from the glucose into the individual ATPs to go out to our cells. So glucose is the fuel. ATP is the medium that we deliver the energy to the cells. Okay. So how many carbs? We like carbs. Carbs are tasty. We like carbs come in all forms, and we really like them. The minimum amount that we need on a daily basis is about 100 grams. The recommended level is somewhere around 150. Number of carbs in my little pumpkin spice bar is, let's see, 19 grams of carbs. So I could eat about 8 of these daily. I'd probably get really tired of them after a while, but I could eat 8 of these and I'd be right in, and if I had no other carbohydrates, I'd be fine with that. It does take, it doesn't sound like it's a lot of carbohydrates, but you'd be surprised what we can do with 150 grams. I mean, a baked potato is about 60 grams. The bun on a burger like on a Whopper or something, it's about another 60 grams. So we have a lot of flexibility in our foods on a daily basis, to watch the carbohydrates. And, it's probably incredibly difficult to, who's going to count their, most people aren't going to count their carbohydrate grams on a daily basis. But most healthcare providers will tell you now that the problem with our diets is not fat. We've been told for years, that we want to have high, low fat foods, zero fat foods. Fats are bad. We don't want to have any fat in our diet, and so everything is fat free or zero calories or something like that. And it turns out it isn't fat. Fat's not the problem after all. It's the carbohydrates. Because carbohydrates, if we eat excessive levels of carbohydrates, guess what they become?
Sugars.
They become sugars. And if we can't do anything with the sugars, then those sugars then are stored in adipose as fat. And so if we have a diet that's high in carbohydrates, we can end up with still getting excessive levels of adipose cells accumulating the lipids, because conversion works both ways. So if we have less than 50 grams, if we only had 50 grams or less, we would start going after the proteins and the lipids. We usually would break down our fats first and convert them to glucose. And then after that, we go after the protein and start breaking down the protein, again, through gluconeogenesis. Now, unfortunately, in the United States, we probably go somewhere towards 300 grams a day of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates taste good. We like our breads and our rolls and our pastas. And, it's hard to turn away from something that tastes that good. Who doesn't like freshly baked bread, still warm, or really good, like dinner rolls or biscuits, or, that are really, or spaghetti, or all these other great carbohydrates, we like them. They taste good. They make us feel good. They make us, it satisfies our hunger need at the time. But we as a nation, we tend to eat too much. We all like our carbs, and particularly in the Southeast, we have a real problem with carbohydrate consumption. In the Southeast, we have lots of people eating lots of carbs. Now, how do we know that? Well, I mean, we don't go around like watching to see what you're eating or something like that, but we can see the end result where we have high levels of diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, what is still referred to as sugar diabetes, is one of the major health issues in the South, and particularly in Tennessee. It's in the top 3 or 4 things in the state that are killing our patients. So if we have lots of carbohydrates in our diet, we're going to end up with lots of sugars. And we're going to have excessive amounts of sugars. If we have excessive sugars, then our pancreas has to produce more insulin. And at some point, our pancreas says, no, I'm going to produce my own insulin, and it's not going to get recognized by your cells. And you're going to have to get, lose weight, change your diet, or get insulin injections. That's, pretty much how it works. And we'll spend a lot of time, again, in AP2 talking about this. But that's one of the big issues. Also, since carbohydrates can accumulate as fat, because what our bodies do is we process the carbohydrates, turn them into glucose. The cells take in all the glucose they can. The rest of the glucose can go to the liver, and the liver will store it as glycogen. And what's left over there will end up being converted to fat and stored in the adipose tissue. And we end up with weight gain. But we also have a lot of extra fat around, and that can lead to heart disease. So we have have lots of people that have heart disease in the Southeast. Lots of people in Tennessee have heart disease because of their diet. So So we have a lot of things that, that we have to focus on this. When you talk to your patients, you have to be able to get them to understand in a nice way, because, most people are going to be a little intimidated by their physician. But unless you're planning on being a physician, if you're going into any of the other healthcare areas, you're going to be the friendly face that they can talk to. That's where, when you go into your doctor's office and they have the nurse or the medical technician comes in and they talk to you and they say, how are things going? And they're very friendly. Part of that is to gather all the information they can in a non-intimidating manner. You don't want to feel like you don't want to get defensive and say, no, I didn't really eat those 6 pizzas last night. It wasn't me. I don't know how my weight went up 40 pounds since last month. It wasn't me. But when you talk to them, you're going to get this information on their history, and it's going to be able to figure out a way to, sort of get them back into homeostasis. Because a person with health issues on their carbs is not in balance, and it may not hurt them now. If you have a 30-year-old patient, they're not going to have the health issue now, but it may start in 10 years or 5 years. Hypertension, high blood pressure, starts in the 30s, and it doesn't really become, it doesn't kill you until you're in your 60s or 70s, but it could be stopped anywhere along the way. So, okay, off my soapbox. The complex carbohydrates, the breads, the cereals, the crackers, the flour, the pastas, the nuts, the rice, and potatoes, they're starchy. They're good for us. A marathoner, for example, will load up on pasta before a race. Marathon's not really a race, it's more about endurance. It's 26 miles. And they will have pasta for breakfast, because it's something that will give them long duration energy to break down over time. They're not going to eat a bowl of frosted flakes. They're not going to eat a couple of fruit bars or something like that. That's going to give them a quick burst of energy, but it's not going to give them any legs. They're not, because a marathon's an endurance. Donuts aren't going to give them the endurance. Donuts are going to give them a short burst of energy, because things that are mostly simple sugars are not going to be beneficial. The things we need to avoid in high, don't avoid having a Coke or a Snickers bar or ice cream. Yesterday everybody came in eating ice cream. There was this ice cream giveaway downstairs. So everybody at 11 o'clock had ice cream. It's like, where'd that come from? And why didn't they tell me about it? So, we like our sugary foods. They taste good. Most of them are filled up with simple sugars. We get energy from it, but it doesn't last very long. These simple sugars give us a quick rush of energy. You eat a candy bar and you feel better briefly because you get all this sugar coming in. We're breaking all that sugar down very quickly because it's mostly glucose and sucrose, and that's very easy and quick. We can quickly break that down to energy, but there's a surge and then a drop off. Plus, your average Snickers bar doesn't have a lot of vitamins and minerals in it. The best thing about a Snickers bar from a food perspective is it has lots of peanuts, and the peanuts have oils and the peanuts have protein. So of all the candy bars out there, something like a Snickers bar is going to have some true nutritive value. Anything with peanut butter in it, like a Reese's cup, or the peanut M&Ms, anything that can give you a little protein in there is a healthier snack than something that's pure chocolate. Not that there's anything wrong with chocolate, but as far as, what should you eat? Well, if you have your choice, but again, what you're getting is mostly empty calories in here. And if we eat a lot of foods with empty calories, it's not going to help us. We're not going to get the vitamins and minerals that we need. We need certain vitamins. We need vitamin B12, for example, to help make red blood cells. We need vitamin D so that our bodies can absorb calcium in our small intestine. So these are, we need vitamin A to improve our night vision. So the old story about eat your carrots, it's good for your eyes. There is a basis in fact for that. Carrots contain beta carotene, which is and carrots contain vitamin A. Vitamin A improves the pigment in our eyes in the retina so that we can see well at night. So there's a basis in fact in a lot of this. So we try to have a balance of the simple sugar foods and the complex carbs when we eat. One of the things, somebody, I think you mentioned about the fruits. Fruits, fruits are healthy, but fruits contain a lot of sugar because they're mostly carbohydrates. An apple, you bite into the apple, and that's all starchy. That's a carbohydrate. What about, who likes bananas? Anybody here like bananas? Okay. Now, survey: green or brown? Who likes green? Okay, you like green. Okay. You like brown, with all the spots on it and everything. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yellow. Okay. Okay.
I don't want it to be like too green either.
Okay. So now Dr. Grice and I are both green banana eaters. Dr. Gurrell Jillian, our lab tech, who is Dr. Gurrell now, by the way, she likes them brown, so we're like at opposite ends of the spectrum.
Brown is good for banana nut bread.
Yes, exactly.
And my grandmother, she's like, make sure they're green, and you buy them, and she'll let them sit on the counter for 2 weeks, then she chops them up and makes banana bread.
Yeah, and you know why?
Sweeter.
Because they're sweeter. The starches in the banana have broken down, and by the time by the time they're brown, they are much sweeter than they were when they were greenish yellow, and so people they like bananas to be brown because they're sweeter and mushier. I just can't handle the mushiness of a brown banana. But where there's more complex carbohydrates at the greenish yellow end, but there's more flavor and sweetness at the brown end. They're like I said, they're perfect for banana bread and muffins and all sorts of stuff like that. Simply because of the change that as the sugars break down. Anybody know what a persimmon is? Anybody ever hear of a persimmon?
Yeah.
Okay, persimmons are fruits that grow wild, and they're a very bitter fruit. Right about now, if you had a persimmon tree or nearby, if you would take one off and bite into it, it would be extremely bitter. After the first killing frost, the sugars start breaking down, and these persimmons become very sweet. And if you have deer in your neighborhood, they're all going to gather around. They love eating persimmons. It is a very bitter fruit initially, and it protects it from being eaten by anything. But once they start breaking down the starches, then it's like dessert to the deer. So, okay. Let's go. Okay, now let's talk about fats, the lipids. In our bodies, we are always monitoring. I got a comment here. Let's see. Yes, a persimmon. Is that what you ate 2 weeks ago? I hope so. Well, because you see, the reason I bring up persimmons. Okay, great. now I got to know where you got your persimmons, because see, my dad grew up in southern Indiana, and in southern Indiana, persimmons are a real delicacy, and they harvest the persimmons and they make puddings and cakes and breads, and it is definitely an acquired taste. But once you acquire it, you never forget it. And I used to, okay, very good, very good. So, yes, I'm a big fan of persimmons. So, thank you. Okay. Anyway, so enough about persimmons. So, I used to get them from this company outside Indianapolis. They'd send them frozen, and then COVID came along and they stopped shipping everything. So I haven't gotten any persimmon pulp for several years now. I'm in persimmon withdrawal. It's one of those things you grow up with and you develop a taste for it. Okay, lipids, the oils that we in our bodies, we pay very close attention to our triglyceride levels in our blood. We don't, that's a good way to measure. But measuring the fat content in our body, we can measure the triglycerides. We want to keep the triglycerides low enough so they can do their job, but not so high where we're going to cause health issues around here. And obviously, the fats that we take in, we prefer to take in the unsaturated ones. You notice there's a double bond in that third fatty acid there. And this is a monounsaturated, what we call a monounsaturated fat. You got the 3 carbon glycerol and the 3 fatty acid chains, and one of them is got the double bond. So we don't get van der Waals. Remember, van der Waals is what causes fats to become solid at room temperature. Animal fat, butter, lard are all solid because of van der Waals. This would be an oil, simply because we can't, that last chain's moving around too fast to allow van der Waals attraction to occur. Okay. We need fats in our bodies. There are certain vitamins that we can only get into our blood because they're fat soluble. They're not water soluble. Like vitamin C is water soluble, but vitamin E is fat soluble. So we have to have it. We have to have fat for that. We use lipids to power our liver cells. We use lipids to provide energy for our skeletal muscle. We have fat deposits around our skeletal muscle. I mean, look at when you buy meat. Look at the meat is trimmed off of the fat, off of the cut of meat. That's because it's there as a source of energy for the cow, for example. When you buy ground beef, you have a variety of choices. It can be 70% meat, 30% fat, all the way up to 95% meat, 5% fat. So we have all sorts of combinations. You can look at the difference, like the 70-30 does not look as, there's not as much myoglobin present in the 70-30 as there is in the 95. Yeah.
So like obviously a cow's a cow meets cow.
Right.
But we buy it from someone who raises their cows and kills them due to less fat, less, grease and stuff like that. What makes it different? Just the way they're fed and raised?
Yeah, it depends on how they're raised, what they raise on. It depends on certain breeds are going to produce more, leaner meat than others. Dr. Grice, down the other end of the hall, used to live on a farm in Granger County and had cows. And her cows were those extra lean type where her ground beef would be like 5% fat.
Yeah, there's like when we make ground beef, well, when you make a meatloaf, you kind of want it to be greasy.
A little, yeah.
So it's not dry. But when we make spaghetti, you drain all the grease out.
Oh, yeah.
So this meat, you don't have to drain anything when we fix it, you just fix it and there's no heat or no
Right,
grease, no
right.
water, nothing. Steaks are the same way, they don't
Mhm.
shrivel up. If it's big, it's gonna stay big. you know.
Right.
I was just curious.
Yeah, it has to do with, cows are, well, a cow is a cow, they're all different. And some cows, like a dairy cow versus a beef cow, you're gonna have leaner meat in the beef cow than you would in the dairy cow. And, because dairy cows using more energy, they have to produce lots of milk. I have ground my own hamburger. Sometimes you like go to Food City and they have a whole bunch of sirloin. It's marked down. And it's still good. I can take it home and run it through the grinder, and I'll get some really good quality ground beef out of it. And my wife will use it for meatloaf or burgers or whatever. Because some things you want to have the grease in there, and some things you don't.
That's when my mom tried. She's like, oh, we have all this meat, let's try to eat a little bit. It wasn't like it just didn't have as much flavor, I guess, where it was.
Yeah, sometimes you have to
You
have.
have to experiment. to
You
figure out
do.
what it's good for.
You know, sometimes you have to, you have to have a little bit of fat in our diet. We can't just go fat free. We've got to have a certain amount of fat. Anybody that says, I don't want to ever eat fat. Yes.
Yeah, we have like beef cows and our Angus ones are like way less fatty than the steaks that we have, like
Mhm.
my cows. And it's really weird sometimes because we'll have like our cow meat and then we'll like have to go buy some because we've sold most of it. And then it tastes like it's weird. It just
Mhm.
doesn't taste, I guess, right. It tastes more, the other one tastes sweeter almost because they feed on like a lot of, I don't know what it's called, but it's like, it's more grain instead of the grass,
Mhm.
which is just different. But I wondered why they put in that instead of more hay or anything like that, because it does better with the meat.
Mhm.
Is it cheaper, I guess? to buy?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and a lot of it depends, again, what's the destination of the cow too? Do you process your own? So,
Well, we used to, we have somebody who does it for us sometimes.
Okay.
We have too many.
do you age your meat, or do you just go ahead and process it right away?
So some of the stuff that's sent off is aged.
Okay.
The stuff that's not, we just do it right then. It takes like pretty long weekend if we do two. But if we do more than that, it's gonna take 4 to 5 days. But we do it right then.
I should talk to you about getting cow hearts,
Oh, yeah,
so.
I can't do any that I help raise,
So.
like that's just not an option.
Because in AMP2, you'll dissect cow hearts. We get them from a slaughterhouse in Morristown, and they're fresh and they're massive, about the size of a football. So anyway, well, that was a nice rabbit hole. Thank you. So no,
My dad took me up there. It's one of his buddies that lives in Rogers, and that he works with. He got his beef masters and he raised them. My dad's like, oh yeah, let's go see the cows. He's like, I don't know what you like animals. We go up there and I'm in the field with these cows, and then like 3 weeks later, my dad's like, oh hey, I need you to meet Roger at wherever, and here it is in a cooler, and I'm like, thanks, Dad. I'm like, I was literally in the field with this cow 3 weeks ago. I was like, and here it is right in front of me. We kind of joke that.
yeah, oh yeah,
it was funny.
yeah. So
I can't do the ones that I'm like, if I have to like lava raise them, yeah, I can't even be like around when they do it.
well, I can understand that too. So okay.
Sure.
Regardless of the fat content, let's see if I can steer this back in here. In the foods we eat, I'm gonna reel it in now. We still need a certain amount of fat. People that say, I'm going to give up all fat. That's not a good approach. Giving up everything in nutrition is never good, because our bodies need, you know, the 3 of the 6 major nutrients are carbs, lipids, and proteins. We got to have them all. Now, you know, we see phospholipids are around the cells, the cell membranes. Our nerves are insulated by a fat called myelin, and it's just like insulation on a wire, you know, so that the nerves will send their signals faster. An insulated nerve can send nerve impulses at 300 miles an hour. An uninsulated nerve sends it at 100 miles an hour. We don't notice the difference because we're talking, you know, inches and, you know, millimeters and very tiny, very short distances. So it doesn't really, for us, 100 miles an hour to go a tenth of a millimeter is still instantaneous, but it means something in the communication of information. We need cholesterol. Cholesterol has been bad-mouthed for years as being bad and unhealthy. And yet we have to have cholesterol in our diet because we need it to hold our cell membranes together, but more importantly, we need it to make all the steroid, what we call the steroid-based hormones like estrogen and testosterone and cortisol and all the hormones that come from the outer covering of the adrenal gland, you know, we call aldosterone, for example. It also, we need it to produce the androgens. These are essentially the non-specific sex hormones produced by the adrenal gland that are going to trigger puberty in us. So we have to have all these fats. We cannot go fat-free in our diet, just like we can't go carb-free. So how much fat should we have in our diet? Well, the average American has, you know, consumes about 40% of their calories comes from fat. Now, how much is that? Well, the average calorie intake a day is, for the average person, is about 2,000 calories. That's what we take in because the price we pay in energy to function is about 2,000 calories. So if we have 2,000 calories in and we burn 2,000 calories, we should pretty much maintain our weight. That 2,000 calories should meet all of our energy demands on a daily basis because that's what we're going to burn daily, 2,000 calories. Now, if you are an Olympic athlete, you may be consuming 10,000 calories a day. Olympic swimmers generally bring in consume 10 to 15,000 calories a day because that's what they're going to burn, you know, in practice for swimming, you know, or runners. Ever watch a marathoner? They have no body fat, they have no body mass essentially, because they're burning up these thousands of calories on a daily basis, and they're taking in thousands of calories to make up for that. We should take in, the average American should take in about 600 calories a day of fat. That's a nice healthy range of, you know, for us to sort of watch for. So, you know, it's like, how many calories a day from fat? Well, fortunately, a lot of our food items tell us. This one had this little food bar protein, this little pumpkin bar has 120 calories. It has 4.5 grams of fat, which means it has 45 calories from the fat, and it has 19 grams of carbs, so that's about 75 calories. So it's 120 calories altogether. Fats give us a great source of energy. They are 10 calories per gram, whereas carbohydrates are only 4 calories per gram. So we can store a lot more energy in the fat, in the lipids, than we can in the carbohydrates. So, but it comes down to about 600 calories a day should be from our fats, and no more. Yeah. What about cholesterol? Well, about 1 egg a day. Okay, 1 egg. You know, most of us don't eat an egg a day. Some of us do. You know, does that mean that you can only eat? You know, if you had an egg on Monday, you can have 1 egg on Tuesday. If you had 2 eggs on Tuesday, it means nothing until Thursday. It's like, do you eat eggs every day during the week? Most of us don't. You know, eggs are going to sneak in some of the other foods we eat, but most of us don't eat eggs every day, at least not that we're aware of. The cholesterol in there, we need that cholesterol. If we don't eat it, our bodies are going to make it. Just cutting it out isn't going to solve any kind of problem. The problem comes in when your patients have diets that are high in saturated fats, high in the solid fats, high in butters, high in animal fat, high in lard, which is rendered animal fat. You know, diets high in saturated fats tend to cause health issues. Now, does that mean we should never eat anything with saturated fat? No, it means that we have to be we have to practice moderation. We have to eat. You know, we can have something that's got saturated fats in it, but not every day. You know, and not in sufficiently large quantities. You know, who doesn't like French fries from McDonald's or Burger King or something? You know, you don't. It's okay. Do you like French fries?
I don't like potatoes.
You don't like potatoes. Okay, that sort of cuts out French fries too. So, yeah.
Starch, I love potatoes.
Oh, yeah. So do I. So, yeah. There is no way I don't like potatoes. When I was a kid, my mom would take leftover on the day after Thanksgiving. She'd take the leftover mashed potatoes and make potato cakes out of them. It's definitely an acquired taste, but it was good. It's like recycled mashed potatoes. So, but again, there's nothing wrong with eating these things as long as it's in moderation. How much pie do you eat on a daily basis? Do you eat pie? Most of us like pie. Okay. Holidays, yeah. Pie crust. We like pie crust. We like our pumpkin pie, our pecan pie. We like our fruit pies. We like biscuits. That's where you're going to pick up your shortenings, whether it's lard or vegetable shortening. How often do we eat like that? Normally we don't. So it all comes down to moderation. One year, I think it was last year, I said, how many of you have biscuits and gravy every day for breakfast? And one guy in the back said, I do. I thought, okay, so I have to be careful when I say stuff like that. But then again, some people do eat biscuits and gravy every day. Is that a good choice? Probably not. Even if you are burning off 3,000 calories a day, is biscuits and gravy a good choice of your foods? Maybe not. See, the more saturated fats we have in our diet, the more likely your patients are going to start showing up eventually with some sort of cardiovascular disease. Saturated fats are linked to heart disease and hypertension, high blood pressure. The problem is it takes time to get there. You don't wake up one day and say, well, I've got hypertension today. I was normal yesterday and now I've got it. My blood pressure is 160 over 100. No, it's a gradual thing over time. And you don't feel bad while it's happening. Your patient will see a gradual rise in blood pressure every year as they go through their physical exams. You'll see it going from normal to a little higher to a little higher. And pretty soon they're getting up into a dangerous range. And if they don't treat it, it's going to cause some significant issues later on. But even people that are hypertensive, that have high blood pressure, don't, for a long time, they won't show any overt symptoms. Because you don't wake up and say, oh, I've got my blood pressure is bothering me today. I don't feel good. No, you just feel fine. Until 30 years later, you discover that your kidneys are damaged and you've got your arteries are clogged in your heart and you're at risk for a stroke. And, hypertension is one of those things that can be fixed every day with one little tiny pill. And, a lot of people don't like to take pills, and some forget. And, why take a pill if you don't, how can it be working? I don't feel any different. It's the kind of thing that you don't feel different. So anyway, enough of that. Where do we get our fats? Well, from animal sources, from lard, which is rendered animal fat. Lard is the equivalent of Crisco. We get it in our meat. We just talked about beef cow and dairy cows, and we talked about the deposits, the trimming the fat off of beef. We find it in our poultry. We get it in our eggs with the yolks. The white of the egg is fine. It's just pure protein. Milk products contain fat. We measure whole milk as its fat content. Whole milk contains 4% fat. The skim milk is 0%. The fat has been drawn off of the milk or filtered out from the milk. And so we have nothing, there's no fat in skim milk, or we have 1% or 2% fat. So we have a variety of choices here on the fat content. But even whole milk is only 4% fat. You're not saving much by going to 2% or 1% in there. Milk, if you have fresh milk right out of the cow, it's going to be, it is not homogenized yet. And so what will happen is all the fat in the milk is going to float on top. The fat will float on top of the rest of the milk because milk is, watery. And that's going to be the cream. The old saying that the cream rises to the top. Well, that's where it comes from. If you have unprocessed milk, the cream is all going to end up on top. It's because it's full of fat, and it can be drawn off and used for other things, or the milk gets homogenized, where the fat's broken down into tiny particles, and now you have whole milk that's full of, it has 4% fat, and it has vitamin D added to it. Somewhere probably 80 years ago, when milk was the idea of homogenizing milk was developed, someone got the great idea to add vitamin D to it, because vitamin D is normally not in milk. So what do we do with our kids? We make, yes.
With that, I used to work at a dairy that pasteurized it, but they didn't homogenize it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they, when the guy who started it looked into it, it was, instead of, whenever you homogenize milk, it went through your blood and stuff, and if you didn't homogenize it, it went through your gut without pulling out as much of the fat.
Okay.
I wondered about that, if you knew anything more, because that's what it also prevented people from being lactose intolerant. So my mom is, and when she drinks that, it doesn't bother her.
Okay. So when you have the whole, it's not.
But you still have to shake it up.
Because the cream is on the top, right? Okay. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that you could still routinely purchase whole milk that had not been homogenized, because the process of homogenation, you got to chop up the fat into little pieces. Now, I don't know how they do that. I know our bodies break up fat using BIOL salts. I don't know how the dairy industry homogenizes milk. That's something I'll have to look into. But that's interesting about that it is, it's a convenience to not have to separate the cream off the top of the milk. I never looked into it. That one I want to follow up on. So did they add vitamin D to the milk there too, or?
I I know that they added something, but I wasn't sure if it was vitamin D or if it was, I haven't worked there in a while, so I can't remember. what
Okay.
it is, but I can find out.
So vitamin D is essential for us in absorbing calcium in our small intestine. We have to have vitamin D. Now, we make vitamin D in our skin. Ultraviolet radiation exposure from sunlight to our skin makes vitamin D. When we're kids, we also need lots of vitamin D to absorb lots of calcium, because calcium is what we use to build our bones up. And milk is ideal because milk contains vitamin D. It also contains calcium. So the calcium goes into our gut and the vitamin D is there, and we can absorb the calcium because we need it for our bones. So it is a very good source of calcium and vitamin D at the same time. But the vitamin D has been added. Now, pasteurization is the process where they heat the milk up over 200 degrees or thereabouts to kill the bacteria. Because raw milk coming out of a cow may or may not be ideal. So you don't know where that cow's been. Okay. You have a question? Okay, so now in plants, we get it from chocolate. We get fat from chocolate. We get fat from the oils, the corn oil, the soybean oil, the cottonseed oil, the olive oils. We get it from coconut. We get it from corn. We get it from seeds. If we like to eat seeds or nuts, like if we like to eat sunflower seeds, if we like to eat walnuts or peanuts or cashews or any of those other nuts, they're all full of oil. The oils are good for us, as in the right amount. They're healthier for us because they are unsaturated fats. The oils from a peanut oil is unsaturated, just like olive oil is. Now, coconut oil is unsaturated, but it is the least healthy of all the plant oils. So we tend to try and stay away from too much coconut oil. So, now, cholesterol, the sources that we all think about eggs for cholesterol, but if you'd like to eat liver or kidneys or brains or shrimp or lobster, those are all high in cholesterol. People do eat liver. Anybody here like chicken livers? Okay. Fried chicken livers, when I was a kid, at Thanksgiving and Christmas, I always looked forward to the turkey liver. And then I found out what livers do. So I stopped eating them then. But some people do. Some people like them. So, kidneys are a real delicacy in some places around the world. In England, they like kidneys and brains, beef brains. That used to be a big thing. Brains and eggs for breakfast until mad cow disease came along and affected the brains of the cow. Fish eggs, I don't think many of us eat a lot of fish eggs, like caviar. That's, I don't know if I've ever tasted caviar, but so all the, but again, how much of these sources of cholesterol do we consume on a daily basis? If we have a diet that just trips over itself in moderation, where you have your diet varies every day, like chicken and beef and fish and or whatever, and pastas and salads and things like that, your patients, if they follow that kind of diet, they're going to have a healthy balance of all these nutrients without having excessive amounts here that can cause problems. It's the excesses that are going to cause the health issues. The problem it comes down to the triglycerides and the cholesterols in excessive amounts. We know that the cholesterol that cholesterol is very important to us. You know, I've already gone through all the things we do, why we need cholesterol. The triglycerides are very important to us. We use triglycerides make up the fat deposits in our body. We have to have fat deposits. We use fat for insulation. We use fat for protection. A lot of the organs of the viscera, you know, in the abdominal cavity have no protection except a cushion of fat around them. Plus, fat is an excellent source of energy. You know, a gram of fat is 10 calories of stored energy. A gram of carbs is only four calories. So while yes, we are going to store glycogen in our skeletal muscle, we will store more fat around there so that the muscle cells can draw on the fat when the glycogen gets depleted. Yeah, so it becomes a very good source of fats become a very good source of stored energy for us. Okay. Now we start getting into trouble when we're moving the fats around in our bodies. When we eat fats, the fats don't get really processed until they get into the small intestine. The small intestine is right below starts right below the stomach, right about here. In the first 10 or 12 inches is called the duodenum. And in the duodenum, we discharge 2 sets of proteins in there. Well, 1 set. We release digestive enzymes from the pancreas to break up proteins in here. We also release bile from the gallbladder. And the gallbladder is up here in the liver. Liver sits right here. The liver makes bile. Bile is a salt that chops up fat into small pieces. And so they both get dumped into the duodenum, and we finish the processing proteins, and we chop up fat into little pieces, and then we can start absorbing the small pieces of fat in the rest of our small intestine, the remaining 20 or so feet of it, and we absorb it. We can't absorb fat as a triglyceride because it's too big, but if we chop it up, it's easy to get across. So it takes place in here. We chop up fats, we chop up cholesterol, and they're going to get transported. They're going to first go to the liver, because everything we eat and everything we drink goes straight to the liver before it goes into our blood supply. And then, depending on what kind of fat it is, it's going to be transported by either a high density lipoprotein or a low density lipoprotein. Low density lipoproteins take triglycerides and fats and cholesterol from the liver out to all the cells. And if we have a lot of cholesterol in our diet, we have a lot of triglycerides in our diet, we're going to be sending a lot of fat out to all of our cells. We're going to see fat accumulation. You know, a diet high in fat will result in higher levels of fat accumulation in the body. It will also result in accumulation around the arteries, particularly in the heart. Coronary artery disease, heart disease, occurs because fat deposits collect in the arteries in the heart that supply the heart muscle with blood. See, the heart doesn't get anything from the 4 chambers. The heart has its own blood supply. The heart takes the first 5% of the oxygen-rich blood leaving the heart to go to the body. The first 5% of that goes straight to the heart. And we have our own circulatory system within the heart itself. And if we have excessive amounts of fat and cholesterol, we can form this stuff called plaque. You see the yellow substances there. We can start narrowing the arteries. The arteries shrink. And in some cases, you know, you'll have a patient that's got heart disease and the plaque accumulation in their artery has got it 95% blocked. They have just like a little tiny opening for blood to go through to the muscle cells. And so we have, this is one of the consequences of a long-term high-fat diet. And we see this, the artery becomes blocked, they have heart disease, the cardiac muscle gets weaker, you have options to treat that. You can open up the artery and put in a stent. You can do coronary bypass. Your patient's likely going to have a heart attack at some point and may or may not survive from it. So there are ways to, but the earliest way to fix it is to not let it happen. Same thing can happen in the brain. The brain, arteries in the brain will also become clogged, and that creates a risk of a stroke. Now, a stroke is either a rupture of a blood vessel in the brain or a blockage of a blood vessel. In either case, we cut off the blood supply to brain tissue. Now, brain tissue is very sensitive to loss of blood. Brain cells can only survive for 5 minutes without oxygen. So you have a rupture of a vessel or a blockage in a vessel, you're cutting off the blood supply to those neurons, those brain cells, and they're going to start dying right away. The heart's a little better off. The heart cell, muscle cells can last for about an hour before they start dying. So now we have another problem. We got just a few minutes here. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease. Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease is the human form of mad cow. Bovine spongiform encephalitis. That is what mad cow disease is. It causes the brain to shrink and rot. It ends up looking like a sponge. That's why they call it spongiform. It looks very much like a sponge, and it degenerates. If you eat meat infected with mad cow disease and you can't cook it and make it safe, then you could become infected and have the same thing happen to your brain. And that's what Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease is. And we actually have about 3 or 4 cases a year in the United States, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but we're not supposed to have any cases. 20 years ago, the only places where we saw Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease was in New Guinea, near the Solomon Islands. And you had 2 cannibal tribes that would go out, they were literally going after each other. And one tribe would, if one tribe won a fight, then they would eat their victims, the losers. And if the other ones won, they'd eat. And so Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease shifted back and forth between these 2 populations. Somehow it's made the jump to other parts of the world. Mad cow disease is a good way to see this transmitted. Now, there are no cases of mad cow in the US, but other countries have had it. England had it a few years ago, and they had to destroy all their herds because of that. We do have it.
Cooking the meat too.
Hmm?
Cooking the meat.
Cooking the meat will not destroy it. Cooking the meat, the substance is known as a prion. It's not a virus, it's not a bacteria, it's indestructible. And so you can't make it better. You have to destroy the whole thing. And lately, we have a concern now, and this is our last point, we'll pick up on this, chronic wasting disease in deer. We've seen cases of this in Tennessee now, where chronic wasting disease is the deer version of mad cow. And so if you get your deer and you get it processed, and the person in front of you had a deer that has chronic wasting disease and the equipment wasn't cleaned properly, your deer meat becomes infected. And now you run the risk of developing this too. So, because I know that when I started teaching here 18 years ago, we'd say, well, we don't have any cases of chronic wasting disease in Tennessee. Other states around us have it, but we're pretty good about keeping it out. Well, now we've gone to the point where we have it in Tennessee too, which is essentially the same thing as mad cow. Okay, that's a good place to stop. And anybody have any questions? Okay, I will be opening up that bone test for anybody that wants to take it, start taking it. And I'll just leave it open until after fall break.